One more example that Trump's immigration dragnet won't just be limited to criminals and gangsters. A new memo from the Justice Department outlines an aggressive new strategy to actually strip citizenship from naturalized Americans. Axios reports that of the more than 46 million immigrants living in the U.S. in 2022, 53% were naturalized citizens, according to a Migration Policy Institute. Lee McGowan is still here with us, and joining us at the table is Danny Ceballos, criminal defense attorney, MSNBC legal analyst, friend of the show. Lee, I'll start with you because you are a naturalized U.S. citizen.
I am.
Does this strike some fear in you?
How could it not? You know, I'm not alone. There are 24 million of me in this country that are naturalized. You said 53% of the total amount of immigrants. And I think it just keeps bringing it back to the idea that this was never about illegals, about criminals. It was about who we don't want in this country, because the amount of people that we're seeing rounded up, you know, at immigration courts, they're there doing it correctly, and they're being rounded up and taken by ICE officers. Then we're talking about, does your birthright citizen count? You know, does that count? And then you talk about people like me who are naturalized. I came here as a student. I had a student visa. Then I had an H-1B visa. Then I had a green card, temporary green card, then a green card. Then I applied for citizenship. It is no joke. The common argument for undocumented immigrants in this country is, why don't they just come here legally? And the legal way is actually very hard. It is expensive. It is hard. It is complicated. We don't have nearly enough ways to come here legally. There's a lot of people who come in crisis and then think, okay, I'll just get my things organized once I'm here and my family is safe. I did it completely legally, and I can tell you it took years. It took thousands and thousands of dollars, and it took time. You're constantly jumping through new hoops to prove that you are not a problem. And now they're saying you did it entirely legally, and we can still take it from you because we're going to decide who's American, we're going to decide who counts, and we're going to decide what the rules are after the fact. And that's a little bit like changing the rules of the game after you've played the game.
Which is kind of what Trump is doing with foreign policy, with our trade agreements, changing the rules in the middle of the game when people have followed the rules and they don't expect it. What kind of safeguards, Danny, are in place? What kind of laws to protect people who are naturalized citizens who have done everything right?
There is actually a federal law that covers the grounds for denaturalization proceedings. And they include, for example, if you make a false statement on your application, if you are a member of a group like the Communist Party, anything that would have rendered you ineligible to be naturalized in the first place technically can be used in a denaturalization proceeding. But the other crafty thing the Trump administration is doing is proceeding mostly by civil denaturalization as opposed to criminal denaturalization. And by doing so, they have a burden of proof that is easier. They don't have the same safeguards that you have if you are a criminal defendant. So that is why they're proceeding by civil denaturalization. Keep in mind, the grounds are few under federal law, but think of it this way. If the Trump administration, as they did in their memo, they list a lot of grounds for denaturalization that I think really are not within the statute and the limited grounds. But here's how you can do it. If you decide somebody is someone you don't want in the country, scrutinize their application. Just take, for example, the first denaturalization proceeding the Trump administration accomplished this year. They basically took a convicted criminal and looked back, by the way, a criminal convicted of some pretty terrible crimes. But they went back and looked at his application process. One of the questions, have you ever committed a crime you haven't been arrested for? Well, who among us, well, never mind, I don't want to know. But who among us, you know, would answer that question absolutely correctly? And so, sure enough, he said, I had some speeding tickets or something to that effect. And meanwhile, he had been committing the crime of which he was ultimately convicted. So that gives you an example. You decide someone is someone you don't like, you can find a way that they lied on.
But what if you're someone who's otherwise been living a law-abiding life and you answered that question saying, no, I don't think I've committed any crimes, but it turns out someone found out that you, I don't know, there's all kinds of petty crimes people can commit, or even more serious ones that we forgive people for over time. You know, how real is that threat, I guess, to you, Danny, that there are people who could be here in the country for decades and find out something that they did quite a long time ago that may have nothing to do with their day-to-day life and how they treat people in this current moment could be used against them in these proceedings?
Yeah, by the way, the one denaturalization this year, and you can look it up, I won't get into the details. I mean, this is not necessarily someone that should have been protected. Maybe that, you know, they committed a pretty awful crime. And that might have been a good reason, but I don't know yet that we should say that all naturalized citizens should fear that they're both covered by the memo and can be removed under the federal statute, because ultimately it is not the administration that decides. It is a federal district judge. Now, we can get into a whole discussion about how the Trump administration is really good at finding district judges or districts in which they will have more favorable outcomes. But guess what? Other administrations do the same thing. Other litigants do the same thing. Everybody judge shops to some degree. But there is a backstop, and hopefully and presumably it is a federal district judge or maybe an immigration judge, depending on the proceedings.
If I may, so I'm so sorry. Just because this idea of everybody judge shopping is just crazy to me, because not everybody completely overturns the Constitution over and over and over again. Like, as someone who's in this position, I don't think citizenship should be conditional or contingent on something. I don't think you need to have committed a crime. There's the last two things on his memo are like, or something that we deem un-American, right?
That's
like
true.
that could be anything. That could be speaking against the president. That could be,
or as we've seen with student protesters.
Exactly. You're speaking up for the people of Palestine, whatever it is. At the end of the day, what they're doing here is not right. And I think we have to keep saying that, because it doesn't matter if they take people that look like me, like some 1950s housewife. Like, I look exactly like I'm supposed to look in this Trump America. And yet they could say her politics aren't right, so we're going to remove her for that reason. Everybody is now on the chopping block, and that is not how a country can function, and that's not how immigrants are supposed to live in this country. Once you become a citizen, I cried the day I became a citizen. I was so moved by the entire experience. I was in a room full of immigrants. We all had the American dream. We were there. I've been a citizen for 17 years. The idea that that could just be stripped from me because I have used my right of free speech, because I have used my right to protest, because I have spoken up against the current administration is awful, and it should make everybody just
Let me just say one thing, that just because the administration may not like what you're saying, at least I just want to say that technically that would not be grounds. But what they could do, I understand, the end run around would be they would say, we don't like her, and then the easiest route, I think, would be scrutinize your application, find if you put anything in there that is plausibly not accurate. And I'm not suggesting anything here, but that would be the strategy for doing it.
People make mistakes on these things.
Yeah, but
I make mistakes every